Welcome to Spectrum Perspectives, real talk with parents, professionals, and autism advocates. With your host, Cindy Gellermini.
Hi, everybody. This is Cindy with another episode of Spectrum Perspectives. And today I have a special guest. His name is Ben Levin, and he's here to join us to tell us his story about having autism himself. And he's also the author of a new book. And we're going to get to that later, but we're going to start in the beginning. But first, I want to welcome you, Ben, to the show. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
I'm very happy to have you. So I'm going to ask you questions. I always start every interview the same, and I ask everybody the same questions. When I'm interviewing a mom or a dad, I always ask them, how was the pregnancy and the birth of the baby? And when I interview someone who's an adult who actually has autism, you're not the parent, you're the baby, right? But now you're not a baby anymore. But I still want to know kind of the same questions. So when your mom was pregnant with you, you might not know the answer to this, but do you know if the doctors had told her that there might be a problem with the pregnancy or the birth?
No, I don't know.
Okay, because sometimes they do tests, while you're pregnant, but so far everybody's answer is there were no problems. And then when you were born, like there was no problems with the birth or anything like that. Like they didn't rush you off to another room because they thought you were sick or anything.
This is gonna be very funny, but I was actually born in a walk-in closet.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
Several weeks early.
Oh, okay. So you were early. You were a preemie. Why were you born in the closet? She couldn't get to the hospital fast enough?
Yeah.
Huh.
Something like that. I don't remember. All I
Oh,
remember
yeah.
is from what mom's told me is I think she was on the toilet when her water broke, and
Yes.
then she went to grab a dress, but I was coming out really quickly. My dad eventually arrived and called 911, and they helped me get out.
Wow. Okay, that's a first. And then usually people find out that their child has autism around 18 months, 2 years old, because it's usually about when they start speaking. And that's when they notice, they're not really looking at me. They're not really talking. They're not really doing the things that they should do. Do you know anything about when you began to speak?
I know a little about it.
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure my parents first started noticing things when I was 3. I don't know for sure. I was diagnosed shortly before I turned 5, and
Okay.
my issues, I was very, very disconnected. I mostly spent time with myself. I could talk, but I was very quiet as a kid, which is ironic because I talk all the time now. And
Okay.
and when I didn't really do things with others, there was this one birthday party where after we ate ice cream while the other kids played party games, I just fell on the wallpaper
You
and
did, wait, I'm sorry, you cut out. You did what with the wallpaper?
felt around it. And whenever something changed, I would tend to scream.
Mm-hmm.
When I was 4,
Yeah.
I was taken to this neurologist who had me watch Charlotte's Web while they examined my brain, and they saw that my wiring was different.
Really?
Later I got the diagnosis, autism.
Oh, that's interesting because usually they just ask the parents questions about your behavior. That's the first time that I've heard that they actually hooked you up and looked at your brain. How far back do you remember? Do you remember going and having that done when you were 4?
Yeah, I remember going to the hospital and
Okay, so you remember that. Okay. Now, so you were diagnosed around 5. So that's the age that you would be going to kindergarten, right?
I was still in
You were in
preschool.
preschool. Okay. And you were going to a regular preschool, right? You weren't going to a school for autistic kids. You were in a regular preschool, right?
I don't know. I did have some special ed kids in my class. There were 9 of us.
Okay. Well, what about when you went to school? Did you go to, did you go to a regular elementary school with everybody else?
I was homeschooled from first grade through third.
Oh, okay. Did your mom teach you when you were homeschooled or no?
When I was homeschooled, I did this program called Sunrise. I
Mhm.
think with these types of things, mom would probably be the better person to ask.
That's fine. I just want to get to, I want to get to more of the time when you were in school and what your life was like during school age, right? So how old are you now?
19.
19. Okay. So I want to talk about between like 8 and 18, like that time frame. So
Mhm.
that's why I'm just curious where you went to school and what your relationship was like with other kids. So after you were done being homeschooled, then you went to a school, you said.
Yeah, a special needs school in New York.
Okay. And did you like it there? Were you happy there or no?
I was.
Okay. So you said they were trying to pull you out of the isolation. So what was going on in your mind when you always wanted to be alone?
I don't really remember most of that. I
Mhm,
just remember preferring to play games alone.
mhm.
And
So you were happy playing alone. It wasn't like you didn't like being around other people or anything. It was just that you were happy doing what you were doing.
it was more like I think it's a really tricky thing to describe. I I didn't know how to be with others.
Mhm.
And I I did have friends who I did parallel play with, but I didn't know really how to do things with them.
Mhm.
It's really complicated, I
Right.
guess.
I guess I'm just trying to figure out, because my son used to have seizures. And so if I met someone that also had epilepsy, I would ask them questions like, what does it feel like? What does it feel like when you have a seizure or when you wake up? Because my son could not talk ever. And so I was trying to learn from somebody else that went through it so that I could understand what was going on inside him. Right. So that's why. I'm just kind of asking questions because I want to know what was going on inside you. Like, how did you feel? What were you thinking? Just so I can try to understand something because I don't know what it's like, you know?
Okay.
Okay. So when you were in your school, what kind of things were you learning? Were you learning how to read and do math and everything like everybody else, or did they give you different things to do?
One thing you should know is the special needs school I went to from third grade through seventh
Mhm.
was a Waldorf school. So, in addition to, I learned how to read, write, and do math, but we didn't have a lot of science classes, and we got a lot of classes with the arts, such as handwork and woodshop, and
Mhm.
even this type of dancing called eurythmic.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, well, my son, he went to a school that was just for autistic kids, and because he couldn't speak and he didn't really understand, he never even learned how to read or do math or any of that. They just spent their whole time just trying to teach him how to communicate. So you were beyond that. That's why I'm curious what they did in your school. So tell me about how you went through a time where, you know, you felt that maybe you were cured of your autism.
So here's what happened. My parents misunderstood from the Sunrise program. They thought the goal was to cure me of autism.
Mhm.
And even more harmful, they actually thought it did. I was 11. I'd been in auto spec, my school, for a couple years when we first started considering me recovered from autism. And
Mhm.
that confused me a lot. I I wasn't sure if I thought the fact I'd once had autism made me less human. Then in eighth grade, after I switched schools, after I got into an argument with someone about whether or not you can recover from autism, I started keeping it a secret because I didn't want to seem like a liar or a crazy person. And it actually felt liberating that no one knew because I told everyone at my old school, and I felt very self-conscious about it, especially since I used to do a lot of weird behavior when I was a kid up until like sixth grade. But having that secret stifled me. My Other than one friend, most of my friendships barely developed. A little over a year ago, I first realized that my secret was stifling me and that I needed to eventually tell people, but I wasn't sure how. Then, 5 months later in February, I, with the help of a close relative, I started to finally accept that even though if I hadn't done Sunrise, I don't think I ever would have been able to function properly and be able to spend time with others and gain social skills. It did not remove my autism, but I shouldn't have wanted my autism removed in the first place. That idea was really bad for my self-esteem. A month later, well, a little over a month, in April for Autism Awareness Month, or as I personally think it should be called Autism Acceptance Month, I posted claiming my autism on Instagram, and it was one of the best experiences of my life, having my secret finally out and getting all this support, as I want to help change the way people view autism. It is stigmatized way too much, and it's led to way too many self-esteem issues, not just for me, but for others on the spectrum. And I think the fact that I'm a published author is an example of how we are capable of leading full and complete lives. Autism's not a curse, it's a gift. Everyone needs to understand that.
Why do you think it's a gift?
I'm we all have our own special thing, our special interests, they tend to be called, and those special interests give us so much potential. I My brother specifically said we all have superpowers, and mine is my writing. And because of my autism, I was able to hold on to all these different storylines. I work on several different stories at once, typically, and keep them memorized, rarely lose them. And I am able to just work and work and work on my stories, and which is really important to me.
Right.
I've also made some really good friends who are also on the spectrum, and that is one of the best parts of being autistic, having friends who understand me. And
Are your friends autistic too?
I have most aren't, but I have a few who are really important to me. The community from the autistic community is so important with the bonds we make with each other because they are so special.
Are these friends that you made in school or outside of school?
Some are from my old school. I recently made a really close one who's also an autistic author, and we actually formed a special needs club together to focus on the gifts of the special needs at our school, called the PH Special Talents Club, which I've made more friends through. And I also have a really good friend from camp who's autistic.
Mhm. Where is the club, online, or like, do you get together on Zoom calls, or how do you talk to each other in this club?
The club meets once a week at lunch, and
Okay.
we talk about our special talents as well as navigating the world through our challenges.
Mhm. Good, so you support each other. That's good.
Yes, we do.
So you said a couple minutes ago that you used to do weird things or had weird behaviors or something. What was that? What were you talking about?
Some things I'm still really self-conscious of. Most of them were from my second year of third grade through fifth grade.
Mm-hmm.
I I I was an obsessor.
Mm-hmm.
I in both of my years from in third grade, I made up all these different imaginary schools and imaginary friends who I practically was addicted to playing games with.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, and it's something that's still really hard for me to talk about, actually.
Well,
And
I'll just tell you, as from a mom's point of view, I don't think that's anything to be embarrassed about. I think that
in third grade, it is. For
well,
only,
but knowing that you're a writer now, it just shows me that you have a great imagination and you are making up characters in your mind and you can now translate that into a book. I don't think that's, maybe, it's your superpower, right? I mean, other third graders didn't have that much of an imagination as you did, but that's your gift.
oh my,
Yeah. I mean, maybe you didn't think of it that way back then, but look at it now. You were already
I might
writing
cry.
stories. Yeah. You were already writing stories back then from third grade.
Mhm. I was also really self-centered as a kid, and I had all these different obsessions that lasted for months, even years,
Mhm.
and I was also violent at times. And
Violent toward other kids or toward your parents or
other kids.
okay. The reason that I asked those questions only is because you said that you were kind of you were acting like you were not autistic. So I wanted to know, what were you doing before? What were you trying to change about yourself? So
Yeah.
right. And other people might ask you those questions too, because they want to understand, what is your autism like? What kind of behaviors did you have? Because that's just
Yeah.
typical. Autism is diagnosed typically by behaviors, and there's certain behaviors that they do, not looking, stimming, nonverbal, so you're more, can I say high functioning, like
I
some,
think what's more accurate to say and
yeah,
is better is lower needs.
yes,
Because the functioning issue, I personally consider that harmful too.
right, yeah. And I kind of feel like I don't know, I have to pause and think, how do I say this? How do I say it the right way? Right. Because we've always described it as high functioning, low functioning, whatever. Right.
Yeah, it's so disgusting.
Well, but your autism is completely different than my son's autism. Right. So
Yeah.
how do I describe the difference? Right. So that's why I'm trying to, so
Maybe go into more specific struggles we have, or just say higher needs and lower needs.
higher needs instead of higher functioning, right? Higher needs and lower needs. That sounds kind of odd too. Just, yeah. Well, my son needed help with everything. But it just seems to me like your main issue is social, right? Because seems to be the thing that you mentioned the most, right? Having trouble relating to other people, right? And kind of
Yeah.
being in your own world and relating to other people, not so much, you were always able to talk. It sounds like you weren't stimming, you weren't
I may have been stimming. I don't remember for sure.
maybe, yeah, maybe. You're not telling me stories that you're running away. You did get
I
violent.
actually did run away several times.
Did you?
Yeah.
So why did you run away?
Well, there was this one time when I had a babysitter over. I wanted to have a race with my dad in the woods, but he wasn't home, and when I couldn't find him, I just decided to race by myself against imaginary people. I raced by myself against imaginary people.
Okay.
I'd been in the woods hundreds of times and knew the trail really well.
Mhm.
And when I got back, the police were waiting for me because my parents were terrified and they lost me. I
Mhm.
ended up telling my side of the story to mom 6 years later.
Oh. Why 6 years later? Okay. Did she ask you, why did you run away? And then what was you didn't answer her?
It just suddenly came up, I guess.
Okay. Okay. And you didn't do anything to harm yourself? You never, like, if you got upset, you didn't bite yourself or bang your head or do any of those kind of things?
The funny thing is I actually kind of struggle with that now,
Mhm.
or I did. There was this time period a few months ago when I was taking on too many things and struggling with self-care, so I was really stressed, and I ended up sometimes when I'm really overwhelmed, I've bitten myself or screamed.
Mhm.
I still sometimes run outside and just scream when I'm really stressed.
Right. What about OCD? You have any kind of
I have a lot of OCD actually. I struggle with insecurity about behavior even now with obsessions, and I'm constantly asking for reassurance, and sometimes I need to do things a specific way.
yeah, like and what about like staying on a routine? Does it bother you if your routine gets messed up or no?
Not with most things though. Constantly when I'm writing, I have to do things a specific way. Like like I have to. There was this time period where I actually made myself jump to music, and whatever song I landed on last determined what what story I had to work on next before I was allowed to work out again.
Oh, that's actually, and that's very interesting, actually. That determines which story, because you have a bunch of stories going on in your head at the same time, you said, right?
Yeah.
So that's how you would make it, that's how you would decide which story to work on. That's actually kind of fun. That's a very
Yeah,
fun
even
idea.
though it was addictive and
Mhm.
actually dangerous in a way that sometimes I had writer's block with a story, and
Mhm.
that along with the mood issues that come from not working out were kind of making me suffer a little.
The mood issues, what, as you were working on the stories, you mean?
I mean, when you don't exercise for a while, you struggle with your mood, and we're in the pandemic obviously, and I was at home,
Oh,
so I
I
was
understand.
Mhm.
Now I know what you mean. Yeah, yeah. So you said in April, you finally accepted your autism.
I accepted it in February and I wanted to post immediately, but my
Okay,
brother thought April would be a better time because it's Autism Acceptance Month.
got it. So that's just this past year you're talking about.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it's not even really a year yet that
Yeah,
you've
my
accepted.
plan is when on April 3rd, 2022, to mark the first anniversary of when I made that post claiming my autism, I'm going to go live, talk about autism acceptance issues that are important to me, like self-esteem and some of my personal experience and stuff like that to commemorate it.
Hmm. Okay, good for you. Good for you.
You
Am I making you uncomfortable with these questions?
Not at all.
Okay,
I think it's still kind of hard for me to remember, but this
that's
is
okay.
really important. I think
Well,
it's actually good that I'm showing vulnerability on screen. So
okay,
because
okay.
I don't think I'm alone with having these insecurities and having
No.
done weird and bad things when you were a kid, and maybe seeing me like this will help other kids on the spectrum and in general feel less
Yeah.
alone.
I have news for you. Every kid feels that way, whether they have autism or not. Every kid has issues when they're when they're growing up as kids and they feel awkward and they feel weird and they feel like people don't like them and they have hard time making friends. And, so I want you to feel that I want you to know you're not alone either. You're not the only one that felt that way. But I'm just curious, what you were doing. And then when you were trying to pretend that you didn't have autism, what were you trying to cover up? Do you know what I mean? Like, that's why I'm asking these questions.
I
Like,
think
how did you, what did you change about yourself to try to act like you weren't autistic anymore?
it's not like that. It's more, I took this stupid test that said I was no longer autistic, and they just started believing it.
What test? Did somebody at the school give you that test or something, or it's something you did
No,
on
it's
your own?
this test my parents found.
Okay. Got it.
And mhm,
Just,
I did.
about years ago, all parents, it was just the culture, like when my son was younger, there were people out there trying to tell you that you could do all these different therapies and all these different things to cure your kids of autism. And parents felt like, I guess I'm supposed to do that. If I don't do it, I must be a bad parent. I have to do whatever I can to help my child,
I know.
and they thought it's helping them, not realizing that it's not something that could be cured and that it's damaging, to your
It's
self-esteem and
damaging the way
feelings.
we think about ourselves, and it's completely disgusting.
Mhm.
I could rant about this for a while,
Go
especially from
ahead.
my personal experience. I mean,
Go ahead. I want to
I
hear it.
mean, it actually felt good that nobody thought I used to be autistic and nobody knew about all of the difficulties I'd had growing up and how I was an obsessor and being violent, and because I blamed so much of that on my autism, and it was and it felt good that nobody knew something which had been a major part of my identity. Nobody should ever have to feel that way.
Mhm.
Period.
Right. You said that when you were younger, the things that you did were bad. Who told you that they were bad? Did you just tell yourself that, or were
My
people telling you to stop doing that? That's bad.
classmates, teachers, I think,
Mhm.
parents. I
Mhm.
mean, sometimes I have these difficult things I used to do that annoyed my parent. That didn't necessarily annoy, but my parents were getting reports, so they were trying to help me fit in better since,
Oh, they were getting reports from school about things you
yeah.
were doing?
hmm
But this is
And
a school for special needs kids that's saying this?
yeah, but the thing is they were there teach to teach, and I was a distraction.
Oh, okay. You were disrupting the class.
Exactly.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Okay. So you accepted that your autism now, right? And now you've accepted that that's who you are, and that you actually have gifts and talents that you're good at, right? And so your gift is writing, right? So tell me about your writing. The book that you wrote, it's not a story about you. It's not an autobiography about you. It's a novel, a story, right?
Yeah, it's about a boy named David who spends 4 years of his childhood homeless.
Where'd you get that idea from?
In religious school, my rabbi showed me and my class a video about children in Florida who are facing homelessness, and seeing them suffer want to help raise awareness. I then envisioned David and decided to write his story.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Great. And when did you write this? When did you write the book?
I wrote it between 8th grade and 10th, and it was published last June.
Really? And who's your publisher?
Jumpmaster Press.
So did you Did you send the book to people or did you self-publish?
Funny enough, I actually have some books I self-published from 8th grade through 10th. Excuse me. So I started off self-publishing, but then when I showed in the whole to my editor, she wanted it professionally published because because homelessness is such a huge subject, and she showed it to a publishing company she had ties with, were also impressed.
Okay, good. Oh, so they picked it up and they published it for you. That's great. And it came out when? Last year? This year?
June 2021.
Okay, so it came out in June, so it's been out for a few months. So if people would like to buy your book, where can they get it? Is it on Amazon?
Yes, as well as Jumpmaster Press.
Okay, it's on Jumpmaster Press and Amazon. Okay, and what about Barnes and Noble? Can they get it there too? BarnesandNoble.com or no?
Not yet. Hopefully one day.
Okay, all right, terrific. Okay, good. So is there anything else that you would like to tell people about, like give, your message about autism? What else would you like to share with the audience?
Main motto that I've had since April when I first claimed my autism after keeping it a secret is embrace yourself. That is the most important thing you can do. Embrace every aspect of yourself and see it as a part of who you are and maybe something that can help you achieve greatness.
That's a great message. And I think that's good for everyone, no matter who you are, to embrace yourself. I wrote a children's book series about, here, look. I wrote a children's book series about my son when he was little. And at the end of every chapter, the mom says to him, "I love you just the way you are."
I love that. Oh my, please email either me or I don't know if you have my email, but please email Andrea a picture of your book and she can email it to me.
I will. It's because I felt like that was my message from God when my son was little. I felt like he said to me, just love him the way he is. Don't try to change him. Don't try to cure him. Just accept him and love him for who he is. And so that's my message to everybody when they read this book. At the end of there's 12 chapters, and at the end of every one, look, see, she says, "I love you just the way you are." So we have the same message, right?
Exactly.
So your message is to love yourself and accept yourself and don't get down on yourself, right? And my message is for everybody else to also accept you for who you are and love you for who you are.
In a way, I'm also fighting for everyone to accept people on the spectrum because too many people don't.
Yeah, and I agree that it should be autism acceptance, right? Yeah, I totally agree. So how do you feel now this past year? I mean, you've accepted, who you are, and then you've released a book. And did you, I know it's been pandemic, but how has your past year yet been? You feel pretty good now?
Yeah, it's not, neither of these issues have been easy because I thought I read for 7 years. I went through a long period of time when I suffered from imposter syndrome because I was wondering if I was faking my autism for attention. But then I read this book called The Reason I Jump by Naoki Higashida, I think the name is, which explains a lot of our behaviors and why we do them. I'm reading about things like breakdowns and obsessions and other things which I've also gone through, helped me feel more connected.
Yeah, I've heard of that book. I haven't read it, but I've heard of it.
You should read it.
Yeah, because I'm trying to ask you those questions, like what were you feeling? What were you thinking? When you do certain things, like, I try to get to the reason for certain behaviors, whatever. And is it a conscious decision, or it's just something about you? Sometimes I hear people say, I don't know why, it just makes me feel better. I don't know why, you know?
I think for me, with these things, yes, they do actually make me feel better. They're a way to release stress. A lot of times especially with the special interest, they're simply fun.
Yeah.
And
Yep, that's what I've heard. Yeah. Yeah, it's just fun. I've also heard about stimming, that like kids are be in school and they make them sit still and pay attention, and they won't let them do their stims and things that they enjoy. And so kind of the pressure builds up all day. And then when they get home, it's like they have to do all their obsessions and things like that, and their stims, because they weren't allowed to do it all day at school, and it just makes them feel better. Anything
Okay.
else that you think that you want to say that you can think of that maybe
I
we
don't
didn't
think so.
cover?
I think we covered everything.
Well, Ben, thank you so much for being with
I
me
have a
today and tell me
request.
your story. Yeah. All right, I'm going to stop recording. That's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed listening and it helped you gain a new perspective. If you're interested in buying our book series, Robbie's World and His Spectrum of Adventures, the link will be in our episode description, as well as my Instagram and Facebook pages. If you enjoyed the show and you'd like more content, please be sure to hit that like button, follow us, and don't forget to leave us a great review. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to join us again on our next episode of Spectrum Perspectives.
Thank you for joining us today. Be sure to join us again on our next episode of Spectrum Perspectives.